I'll never forget the way she looked at me that afternoon, like I was some diseased animal who'd crawled onto her pristine doorstep. My arthritis was acting up again, fingers stiff around the handles of that soup pot, but I wasn't about to show weakness. Not to her. "Rosalind," Clarissa said, standing in her marble doorway like a sentry. Arms crossed. Lips curved in that smile. "You know the one. The kind that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. This will be the last time. You are not welcome here anymore." The words hit harder than the October wind slicing through my coat. I gripped the pot tighter, feeling the warmth seep through the ceramic, the last comfort I'd brought to this house. Behind her, Daniel sat slumped on that ridiculous leather couch. 43 years old, and he couldn't even look at his own mother. Just kept scrolling through his phone like he could swipe away this moment, swipe away me. "I only brought soup," I managed, my voice smaller than I wanted. "The kind you used to ask for, Daniel. When you were sick." Clarissa's eyes flicked to the pot, then back to my face. "How thoughtful. Leave it on the steps. The housekeeper will dispose of it properly." Dispose of it? Like garbage? Like me? That's when I saw it, just for a heartbeat. A purple shadow creeping above her silk cuff. A bruise, dark and fresh. My nurse's training kicked in before I could stop myself. "Clarissa, that mark on your..." She yanked her sleeve down so fast the fabric made a sharp sound. "You need to leave. Now." "Daniel." I tried one more time, my son's name cracking in my throat. "Tell me you're okay. Both of you." He finally looked up. Just for a second. And in his eyes, I saw something that made my chest cave in. Fear. Not of me. Of her. "Mom," he said, then stopped. Swallowed. Started again. "Maybe it's better if you don't come by anymore. For everyone's sake." For everyone's sake. My own son, speaking her words. I set the soup pot down on the cold marble steps. The lid rattled against the ceramic, the only sound in that suffocating silence. 3 generations of family recipes, and she'd throw it away without a second thought. "Fine," I whispered, but the word carried more weight than I intended. More promise than plea. Clarissa smiled wider, victory dancing in her eyes. "I'm glad we understand each other." I turned and walked down those stone steps, each one echoing like a funeral march. The electronic gate clanged shut behind me, that final, metallic punctuation mark on 30 years of being a grandmother. If you've ever been cast out by your own family, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It makes me feel less alone in this. Because what happened next changed everything. My phone buzzed as I reached the car. The notification made my blood stop. Email from Harrison, Caldwell and Associates subject, regarding the upcoming reading of the will. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the phone screen. Charles had been gone 8 months, but his lawyers had been quiet. Until now. "Mrs. Whitmore, the reading of Charles Whitmore's will is scheduled for next Thursday at 2 p.m. As per his specific instructions, all immediate family members and their spouses are required to attend." Required. That meant Clarissa couldn't lock me out of this one. I looked back at the house through my windshield. Light glowed from the windows, warm and golden, but I wasn't fooled anymore. Something rotten lived behind all that beauty. And as I sat there, engine running, a terrible thought crept in like ice water. What if Clarissa's desperation to erase me wasn't about control at all? What if she knew exactly what was in that will? The email burned in my phone like a live wire. Charles had been gone 8 months, 8 long months of silence from his lawyers. Now they wanted everyone at the will reading. Everyone. Including me. I couldn't open it there on the street where Clarissa's security cameras could see me shaking. The neighborhood had eyes, and gossip traveled faster than ambulances in these gated communities. I drove home through the winding streets, past houses that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. My house sat quiet at the edge of Willowbrook, modest by comparison, but still comfortable. Charles had bought it for us 40 years ago, back when Daniel was just learning to walk and the future felt simpler, before money became a weapon instead of a tool. Inside, the silence pressed against my ears. No television humming from the den, no dishwasher running. Just me and the ghosts of better times. I opened the full email with trembling fingers. Mrs. Whitmore. The reading of Charles Whitmore's will is scheduled for next Thursday at 2 p.m. As per his specific instructions, all immediate family members and their spouses are required to attend. Certain clauses will be revealed only at the gathering. Please confirm your attendance. Harrison, Caldwell and Associates. Required to attend. Clarissa couldn't ban me from this one. She could slam doors, humiliate me, throw away my cooking. But when it came to Charles's will, I had rights she couldn't erase. Still, something twisted in my stomach. Why the secrecy? Charles had always been meticulous, yes, but mysterious? That wasn't his style. Unless. I rubbed my temple, feeling the beginning of a headache. Unless Clarissa already knew what was coming. Her desperation today, the way she'd slammed that door, it wasn't just cruelty. It was panic. I needed to talk to Daniel. Away from her poisonous whispers. I dialed his cell. Straight to voicemail. Again. On the fourth try, his voice finally cracked through, low and strained. Mom. Daniel, we need to talk. About the will reading, about what happened today. I can't. His words came fast, clipped. Clarissa's, she's upset. She thinks you're trying to cause problems. Problems? My voice rose despite myself. I brought soup. I wanted to see my grandchildren. You can't just show up unannounced anymore. We've talked about this. We. When had my son started speaking in plurals that didn't include me? Since when does wanting to see my family make me the villain? A pause. Long enough that I could hear voices in the background. Her voice, sharp and insistent. I have to go, he whispered. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my reflection ghost-like in its black screen. When had I become someone my own son was afraid to talk to? My hands moved automatically, preparing tea I didn't want, opening cabinets that felt too empty. On the kitchen counter sat a small stack of mail, bills, advertisements, and buried underneath, a plain manila envelope I didn't remember seeing before. I pulled it free, frowning. No return address. No postmark. Just my name written in block letters across the front. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Daniel's house from across the street. A timestamp in the corner read last Tuesday, the day before Charles's death anniversary. And there, in the bottom right corner, was my car. Parked. Watching. Someone had been watching me watch the house. My hands shook as I flipped the photo over. Written in the same block letters. Some doors stay closed for a reason. The photograph slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the floor like a dead bird. Someone knew my routine. Someone was tracking my movements. And they wanted me to know it. I sank into the kitchen chair, my knees suddenly unreliable. The room felt smaller now, the windows too exposed. How long had I been walking around, thinking I was invisible, while someone documented my every move? And then the worst thought hit me. What if it wasn't some stranger? What if Clarissa had been planning this longer than I'd realized? The manila envelope sat on the counter like evidence I wasn't supposed to find. But someone had wanted me to see it. Someone wanted me scared. Which meant Thursday's will reading wasn't just about money. It was about survival. And I was walking into it blind. That photograph haunted me through the night. Every creak of the house, every shadow that shifted past my window, someone was watching. Had been watching. Maybe still was. By morning, my nerves felt stripped raw. I couldn't sit in my kitchen staring at that manila envelope another second. I needed answers, and there was only one place to get them. Harrison, Caldwell and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest building downtown. Charles had done business with them for 30 years, back when handshakes still meant something and lawyers returned phone calls. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual, my reflection multiplying in the polished steel doors. 73 years old, and I was about to demand answers from men who probably saw me as just another grieving widow. The receptionist's smile faltered when she saw me. Mrs. Whitmore? The reading isn't until Thursday. I need to speak with someone now. My voice carried more authority than I felt. About the surveillance. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Surveillance. I pulled the photograph from my purse, placing it gently on her marble desk. Her eyes widened. I'll get Mr. Harrison. James Harrison had aged since Charles's funeral. More gray, deeper lines around his eyes. He studied the photograph with the careful attention of someone who'd seen worse things. Mrs. Whitmore, I can assure you, this didn't come from our office. Then who? My hands shook despite my efforts to control them. Someone's been watching me. Someone wanted me to know it. He handed the photo back, his expression troubled. Have you contacted the police? The police? Right. Because that wouldn't make me look like a paranoid old woman. Not yet. I wanted to understand what Thursday's reading might reveal first. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Warning. Charles' will is sealed until Thursday. Those were his explicit instructions. But his tone said more than his words. There was something worth hiding. Mr. Harrison. I leaned forward. Was Charles afraid of something when he wrote that will? The lawyer's jaw tightened. I'm not at liberty to discuss. A door opened behind him. Footsteps clicked across the marble floor, sharp and familiar. I turned and my blood froze. Clarissa. She stood in the doorway of a conference room, immaculate as always, but her face went white when she saw me. Rosalind. Her voice was carefully controlled. What are you doing here? The pieces slammed together like a car crash. You knew about the will reading before yesterday. Her lips curved in that poisonous smile. I knew Charles left instructions. That's all. Instructions about what? Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we should. No. I stood, my knees protesting but holding firm. I want to know why my daughter-in-law is here 2 days before the reading. Clarissa's composure cracked just slightly. Daniel asked me to handle some preliminary matters. Without me. You weren't invited to the preliminary matters, she said, each word a tiny blade. The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Mr. Harrison shuffled papers that didn't need shuffling. Clarissa's perfect mask slipped back into place. But I'd seen enough. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking like a countdown. Behind me, I heard Clarissa's voice, low and urgent. She cannot find out before Thursday. Do you understand? If she learns what Charles really left behind, everything falls apart. The elevator doors closed, but her words followed me down 30 floors. What Charles really left behind. Not money. Not property. Something else. Something that could make everything fall apart. Back home, I locked every door and drew every curtain. The photograph sat on my kitchen table like evidence in a crime I didn't understand yet. I tried calling my old friend Margaret, someone who'd known Charles almost as long as I had. But her daughter answered instead. Mrs. Whitmore? Mom's not. She's not taking calls right now. She's been getting some strange visitors asking about you and Mr. Charles. It's made her nervous. Strange visitors. My stomach dropped. What kind of visitors? I don't know. But Mom said to tell you. Be careful who you trust. She said you'd understand. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling. Not just me. They were questioning people in my life, spreading fear like a virus. And then I remembered something Charles used to say when business deals went wrong. When someone works this hard to keep you in the dark, Rosalind, it's because the light would blind them. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room chair, the photograph on my lap, watching the street through a crack in the curtains. Waiting. Just before dawn, a car slowed outside my house. Dark sedan, tinted windows. It paused for exactly 30 seconds, then drove away. But in those 30 seconds, I made a decision. If you're watching this far, comment below and tell me. Have you ever been in a situation where everyone around you seemed to know something you didn't? Because what I discovered next changed everything. Thursday was still 2 days away. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was going to find out what Charles had really left behind. Even if it killed me. I couldn't wait for Thursday anymore. Not with dark sedans cruising my street and my friends too scared to take my calls. Whatever Charles had left behind, Clarissa was working overtime to keep me from finding it. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove to Daniel's office. The downtown building gleamed with corporate polish, all glass and steel reaching toward a gray sky. Daniel's architecture firm occupied the 15th floor, a space Charles had helped him secure when he was just starting out. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Mrs. Whitmore. What a lovely surprise. Let me buzz Daniel. Is he alone? She paused, something flickering in her expression. Actually, Mrs. Davenport is with him. They are in conference room B. Mrs. Davenport. Clarissa was here too. My chest tightened, but I nodded. I'll wait. I settled into one of those expensive lobby chairs that look better than they feel, my purse clutched tight in my lap. Through the frosted glass of conference room B, I could see two silhouettes, one pacing, one seated. The pacing figure gestured sharply. Even from here, I recognized Clarissa's controlled fury. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. My hip was starting to ache from the chair, but I wasn't leaving. Not this time. Finally, the conference room door opened. Clarissa emerged first, her face a mask of professional calm. But I caught the flash of something darker when she saw me. Panic, maybe. Or rage. Rosalind, she said, smooth as silk. How unexpected. Daniel appeared behind her, looking like he'd aged 5 years since yesterday. Dark circles under his eyes, tie loosened, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Mom, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Just us. Clarissa's hand found Daniel's arm. Possessive, protective. Perhaps that's not the best idea right now. Daniel's had a stressful morning. I can speak for myself, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. The three of us stood in an awkward triangle, other employees glancing our way as they passed. Finally, Daniel gestured toward his private office. 5 minutes, he said. Inside, Daniel slumped into his desk chair while I remained standing. The office smelled like coffee and stress sweat. Daniel, someone's been watching me. Taking photographs. Questioning my friends. His jaw tightened. Mom, that sounds paranoid. I have proof. I pulled out the surveillance photo, placing it on his desk. He stared at it for a long moment, his face going pale. Where did you get this? Someone wanted me to have it. Someone wanted me scared. I leaned forward. What did Charles leave me, Daniel? What's Clarissa so afraid of? I don't know what you're talking about. But his eyes said otherwise. He knew something. And he was terrified. Your wife was at the law office yesterday. 2 days before the reading. Why? Daniel's hands shook as he picked up the photograph. You need to stop digging, Mom. For your own safety. For my own safety. My son was warning me off like I was some stranger threatening his family. Is that what she told you to say? He looked up at me then. And for just a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Scared. Confused. Trapped. She's protecting us, he whispered. From something Dad did. Something that could destroy everything. My heart stopped. What do you mean? The office door opened. Clarissa stepped inside without knocking, her smile sharp as a scalpel. Daniel, your 2 o'clock is here. Her eyes found mine. And Rosalind, I think it's time you left. I wanted to fight. Wanted to demand answers. But something in Clarissa's expression made my blood run cold. Not anger this time. Not even annoyance. Certainty. Like she was looking at a problem that would soon solve itself. I walked to the elevator on unsteady legs, my hip protesting every step. Behind me, I heard the office door close and voices drop to urgent whispers. In the parking garage, I fumbled with my car keys, hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. The concrete echoed with every sound, making me jump at shadows. That's when I saw it. A white envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature. Just 5 words in block letters. Stop or lose everything else. I looked around the garage, but it was empty except for the security camera in the corner. Its red light blinked steadily, recording everything. They knew where I parked. They knew my routine. They could get to me anywhere. As I drove home through the afternoon traffic, one thought kept circling in my mind. Daniel had said Charles did something that could destroy everything. But what if it wasn't Charles who was the threat? What if Thursday's will reading wasn't about protecting Clarissa from me, but protecting me from her? The manila envelope from my kitchen table suddenly felt like more than surveillance. It felt like evidence. And if I was right, I had less than 24 hours to figure out what Charles had really discovered before Clarissa made sure I'd never get the chance. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. The threatening note sat on my kitchen counter like a countdown timer, and every shadow outside my window felt like someone watching. Waiting. I was making tea when the doorbell rang. 11:30 at night. Nobody visits at 11:30 unless something's wrong. Or unless they don't want to be seen. I crept to the front window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peer out. A police cruiser sat in my driveway, red and blue lights dark but somehow still menacing in the streetlight. 2 officers stood on my porch. Young. Professional. And they looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I opened the door with my chain still latched. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Rosalind Whitmore." The taller one consulted a small notebook. "We've received a report of suspicious activity at this address." My stomach dropped. What kind of suspicious activity? Harassment. Stalking behavior. The complainant says you've been making unwanted contact, showing up at their home and workplace uninvited. The world tilted. Who filed this report? But I already knew. Mrs. Clarissa Davenport. She's provided documentation of multiple incidents over the past week. Documentation. Of course she had documentation. Probably photographs of me at Daniel's office, records of my visits to their house, maybe even witness statements from people who'd never actually witnessed anything. "Officers, this is my daughter-in-law. We had a family disagreement, but I haven't. We need you to stay away from the Davenport residence and Mr. Daniel Davenport's place of business. Consider this a formal warning." A formal warning? On my record? In the system? Making me look like exactly what Clarissa wanted me to look like. A delusional old woman who couldn't accept boundaries. "This is ridiculous," I said, but my voice came out weaker than I intended. "I'm his mother." The younger officer's expression softened slightly. "Family disputes can be complicated. But the law is clear about harassment." They left me standing in my doorway, watching their taillights disappear into the night. My hands shook as I locked the door, then checked it twice. 3 times. She'd played her first real card. And it was brilliant. Now if anything happened to me, if I disappeared or had an accident, there would be an official record of me being unstable. Harassing. A problem that needed to be solved. I tried calling Daniel. Straight to voicemail. Again. "Daniel, this is insane. Please, just talk to me. Before tomorrow. Before the will reading. Please." But even as I left the message, I knew he wouldn't call back. Clarissa had him convinced I was dangerous now. To them. To their children. To their perfect life. The next morning, Thursday, I woke to find something that made my blood freeze. My car tires. All 4 of them. Slashed. I stood in my driveway in my bathrobe, staring at the rubbery shreds scattered across the pavement. The will reading was in 6 hours, and I had no way to get there. This wasn't random vandalism. This was precision. This was a message. You don't get to show up. You don't get to hear what Charles left behind. I called a cab. Then another. Then another. Every taxi company in town was fully booked or experiencing delays. 20 years I'd lived in this city, and suddenly every car service had nothing available. Money talks. And Clarissa had more of it than I did. But she'd underestimated one thing about me. I'd been a nurse for 40 years. I'd gotten to emergency rooms during blizzards and floods and power outages. I'd never missed a shift that mattered. And this was the shift that mattered most. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, 85 years old but still driving her ancient Bic to church every Sunday. She answered on the first ring. "Rosalind? What's wrong, dear?" I explained about the tires, about needing to get downtown. I didn't mention the police visit or the stalking accusations. Some things were too humiliating to share. "Of course I'll drive you," she said without hesitation. "That's what neighbors are for." An hour later, we pulled up in front of Harrison, Caldwell and Associates. Mrs. Patterson squeezed my hand. "Whatever this is about, dear, you hold your head high. Charles loved you. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Inside the law office, I felt like I was walking into an ambush. Clarissa sat at the polished conference table, perfect as always, with Daniel beside her looking like he'd aged another 5 years overnight. His eyes found mine for just a moment before darting away. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Now that everyone's here, we can begin." But Clarissa leaned forward, her voice honeysweet with poison underneath. "Actually, James, I think we need to address the elephant in the room." Her eyes locked on mine. "Rosalind's recent behavior has been concerning. Daniel and I have had to involve law enforcement." Daniel's face went red. "Clarissa, we agreed. We agreed to protect this family," she cut him off. "From anyone who might threaten it. Even family members who refused to respect boundaries." The room went silent. Mr. Harrison looked uncomfortable. I felt like I was drowning in expensive perfume and legal paperwork. But then something strange happened. Instead of shame, I felt clarity. This was it. The point of no return. Either I fought back now, or I let her erase me completely. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope. The surveillance photo. The threatening notes. All of it. "Before we talk about my behavior," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days, "let's talk about yours." I spread the evidence across the conference table like playing cards in a high-stakes game. Someone's been watching me, threatening me, trying to keep me away from this reading. I looked directly at Clarissa. And I think we all know who. For the first time since I'd known her, Clarissa looked genuinely shocked. But Mr. Harrison looked terrified. The silence in that conference room was deafening. My evidence lay spread across the polished table like accusations no one wanted to touch. The surveillance photo. The threatening notes. The manila envelope that had started it all. Mr. Harrison's face had gone pale as parchment. His hands trembled as he reached for the photograph. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, "where exactly did you get this?" "Someone left it for me. Someone who wanted me to know I was being watched." Clarissa leaned back in her chair, but I caught the flash of something in her eyes. Not surprise anymore. Calculation. "This could be from anyone," she said smoothly. "A private investigator, maybe. Someone concerned about your recent behavior." But Daniel was staring at the threatening note. His face had gone gray. "Mom," he whispered, "someone really wrote this to you. Stop or lose everything else." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Your wife has been very busy, Daniel. Haven't you, Clarissa?" For the first time since I'd known her, Clarissa's perfect composure cracked. "You can't possibly think I think you've been terrified of this moment," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I think Charles knew exactly who you were." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should proceed with the reading. These allegations can be addressed later." He opened the leather portfolio with hands that still shook slightly. The pages rustled like dry leaves in the tomb-quiet room. "The last will and testament of Charles Edmund Whitmore," he began. But as he read the standard opening clauses, My mind kept drifting to that look of terror on his face when I'd spread out the evidence. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about something much darker. To my beloved son, Daniel, Mr. Harrison continued, I leave the main estate, the lake house, and controlling interest in Whitmore Holdings. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. Clarissa's smile returned, sharp as a blade. And to my devoted wife, Rosalind, the lawyer read, I leave the downtown property, the art collection, and... He paused, swallowing hard. And full access to the private safety deposit box registered under both our names, containing documentation she will understand the importance of. The blood drained from Clarissa's face. What documentation? Daniel asked. But Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. Furthermore, Rosalind is named as co-executor of this will, with equal authority to Daniel in all matters concerning the estate. Co-executor. Equal authority. I had power Clarissa couldn't touch, couldn't manipulate away. Clarissa shot to her feet. This is insane. She's been stalking us, harassing us. According to whom? I asked quietly. You. The room fell silent again. Then Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What's in the safety deposit box, Dad? What documentation? Mr. Harrison's eyes darted between Clarissa and me. Your father was very specific about who should have access to that information. Clarissa's hands clenched into fists. James, surely you're not going to let her. Let me what? I interrupted. Claim what my husband left me. That's when it happened. The moment I'll never forget. Clarissa's mask didn't just slip, it shattered completely. Your husband was a fool, she screamed. A sentimental old fool who didn't understand what he was risking, what he was going to destroy. Daniel stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Clarissa, what are you talking about? But she wasn't done. He found out about the accounts, the investments, things that were none of his business, and instead of keeping his mouth shut, he decided to play hero. My heart hammered against my ribs. What accounts? Clarissa's laugh was bitter, broken. Oh, you really don't know, do you? Sweet, naive Rosalind, still believing in fairy tales. She turned to Daniel, her eyes wild. Your father discovered I'd been moving money. Our money. Protecting it from taxes, from government oversight, from people who don't understand how wealth really works. You were embezzling, I said, the pieces finally clicking together. I was surviving, she shrieked. Do you have any idea what it costs to maintain our lifestyle? The house, the cars, the children's schools? Daniel's business was hemorrhaging money, and someone had to be practical. Daniel looked like he'd been slapped. My business wasn't. Your business was failing, darling. Just like your father's little construction company was failing before I saved it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Mr. Harrison spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. Charles came to me 6 months before he died. He'd found evidence of financial irregularities. He wanted to ensure that if anything happened to him, the truth would be protected. Financial irregularities. The safety deposit box. Charles hadn't just suspected Clarissa, he'd gathered proof. I looked at my daughter-in-law, really looked at her, and saw what I'd been blind to for years. The desperation behind the designer clothes. The panic behind the perfect smile. Charles had discovered her secret. And she'd been willing to destroy me to keep it hidden. If this moment is hitting you the way it's hitting me, tap that like button. It helps more people discover the truth. And tell me in the comments. Have you ever realized someone you trusted was living a complete lie? But the most chilling part wasn't what Clarissa had done. It was what she said next, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. If you think that safety deposit box is going to save you, Rosalind, you're wrong. Dead wrong. The way she said dead made my blood freeze. Because I realized that Charles hadn't just died of a heart attack. He'd been silenced. Dead wrong. The words hung in the conference room air like a death sentence. Daniel stared at his wife as if she'd grown a second head. Clarissa, what are you saying? But I knew. God help me. I finally understood. Charles hadn't died peacefully in his sleep like the doctors said. He'd been eliminated. By the woman sitting across from me, her perfect mask finally shattered beyond repair. You killed him, I whispered. Clarissa's laugh was sharp, brittle. Killed him? Your husband had a weak heart, Rosalind. Everyone knew that. The stress of discovering my financial arrangements simply proved too much for him. The stress? She'd made sure of that. You're insane, Daniel breathed, but his voice shook. I could see the doubt creeping in, the terrible recognition that maybe his wife wasn't who he'd thought she was. Mr. Harrison was frantically shuffling papers, reaching for his phone. I think we should call the police. No. Clarissa's voice cracked like a whip. No one is calling anyone. And that's when I saw it. The bulge under her designer blazer. She was armed. My nursing instincts kicked in, assessed the threat, protect the patient, survive. But there were no exits, no weapons, just 3 people trapped with a woman who had nothing left to lose. Clarissa, Daniel said slowly, his hands raised like he was calming a wild animal. Put whatever that is away. We can work this out. Work it out. Her voice rose to a shriek. Your precious mother has just accused me of murder in front of witnesses. There is no working this out. She was spiraling, losing control completely. I'd seen it before in trauma patients, the moment when shock gives way to desperate action. Charles found the accounts, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. How much did you steal from Daniel's business? I saved his business, she screamed. I kept us afloat when his architectural firm was hemorrhaging money. I protected our lifestyle, our children's future. By embezzling, Daniel said, the words coming out like he was choking on them. By being practical. By doing what needed to be done while you buried your head in blueprints and your mother played house. The safety deposit box. Charles' documentation. Suddenly it all made sense. He was going to turn you in. I realized. Charles had the evidence, and he was going to expose you. Clarissa's eyes glittered with rage and something else. Pride. Sick, twisted pride. Your husband thought he could threaten me. Thought he could destroy everything I'd built to protect this family. So I reminded him about the consequences of stress on a weak heart. Daniel made a sound like a wounded animal. How? A little extra medication in his evening tea. Nothing traceable. Nothing that would show up in a standard autopsy. Just enough to accelerate what was already inevitable. The conference room spun around me. My husband, my Charles, poisoned by this monster we'd welcomed into our family. You poisoned him, Daniel whispered, and for the first time in months, my son looked at me with something other than suspicion. He looked at me with horror at what he'd married. I protected us. Clarissa snarled. From a meddling old man who would have destroyed everything. And now his delusional widow is going to do the same thing. She was reaching for something under her blazer. Time slowed to a crawl. This was it. The moment Charles had tried to prepare me for with his safety deposit box, his evidence, his final gift of truth. But first, I had to survive long enough to claim it. Daniel, I said quietly, never taking my eyes off Clarissa. Your father loved you more than life itself. He would never have exposed your wife's crimes if there had been another way. Shut up, Clarissa hissed. But he knew you weren't going to stop. The embezzling, the lies, the control. He knew you'd destroy Daniel eventually, just like you destroyed our family. I said shut up. Her hand was moving faster now, reaching for whatever weapon she'd hidden. And he knew, I continued, my voice growing stronger, that someday you'd have to kill again to keep your secret safe. That's when Daniel moved. He lunged across the table just as Clarissa's hand emerged with something metallic and deadly. They crashed together in a tangle of expensive fabric and desperate violence. Run! Daniel screamed at me. Get out! Get to the police! But I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but watch my son fight for his life against the woman he'd promised to love and honor. The struggle was brief, violent, decisive. When it was over, Daniel sat on the conference room floor, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, while Clarissa lay unconscious beside the overturned chair. Mr. Harrison was already on the phone with 911. And in the terrible silence that followed, I realized something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. Because if Clarissa had been willing to kill Charles to protect her secrets, what would she do to protect herself from a murder charge? And more importantly, how many other people knew what she'd done? The ambulance sirens faded into the distance, taking Clarissa away in restraints. Daniel sat beside me on the courthouse steps, a bandage covering the cut on his forehead, both of us too stunned to speak. The police had taken our statements. The district attorney would file charges. Justice would run its course. But none of that brought Charles back. "Mom," Daniel said finally, his voice hoarse, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see." "You loved her," I said quietly. "That's not something to apologize for." We sat in silence, watching the city move around us like we were ghosts haunting our own lives. 3 hours ago, we'd been a fractured family. Now we were the only family left. "The safety deposit box," Daniel said suddenly. We should see what Dad left." The bank was a short walk from the courthouse. The safety deposit box sat in a sterile room underground, holding Charles's final secrets like buried treasure. Inside were documents, bank records, emails, photographs of Clarissa meeting with men I didn't recognize in expensive suits. And at the bottom, a letter addressed to me in Charles's careful handwriting. "My dearest Rosalind, if you are reading this, then Clarissa's greed has finally caught up with her. I discovered she has been embezzling from Daniel's firm for 2 years, but that was only the beginning. She is part of a larger network, people who launder money through failing businesses, who destroy families to hide their crimes. The bank records in this box will show you the truth. I confronted her 3 days ago. She begged for more time, promised to make things right. But I saw something in her eyes that terrified me. The same look she gets when she talks about getting rid of problems. I fear I may not live to see justice done. But you are stronger than you know, my love. Protect Daniel. Protect our family's name. And remember, she couldn't ban you from my heart, and she can't ban you from the truth. Forever yours, Charles." I read it twice before the words sank in. Charles had known. Not just about the embezzling, but about the danger. He tried to protect us even knowing it might cost him his life. "What does it say?" Daniel asked gently. I handed him the letter, watching his face crumble as he read his father's final words. When he finished, tears ran down his cheeks. "She would have killed you too," he whispered. "If Dad hadn't left this evidence, she would have gotten away with everything." But as we sorted through the documents, one thing kept nagging at me. The photographs. The men in expensive suits. The bank accounts that traced back to companies I'd never heard of. This wasn't just about one woman's greed. This was organized. Professional. And if Clarissa was just one piece of a larger machine. "Daniel," I said slowly, "your father wrote that she was part of a network." He looked up from a stack of financial records. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that arresting Clarissa might not be the end of this. It might just be the beginning." As if summoned by my words, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mrs. Whitmore." The voice was smooth, professional, familiar. "This is regarding your recent family difficulties." My blood went cold. Who is this? Someone who worked with Mrs. Davenport. Someone who is very disappointed in how today's events unfolded. Daniel watched my face, seeing the terror I couldn't hide. "What do you want?" The voice chuckled, low and menacing. Mrs. Davenport was sloppy, emotional. That made her a liability. But the work continues, Mrs. Whitmore. And now that you've seen what's in that safety deposit box, you've become a liability too. The line went dead. Daniel and I stared at each other in the fluorescent light of the bank vault. Charles's evidence spread around us like breadcrumbs leading deeper into a forest we didn't want to enter. My daughter-in-law had banned me from her house. She tried to ban me from my son's life, from my grandchildren, from everything that mattered. But she couldn't ban me from the billionaire's will. She couldn't ban me from the truth. And now, as I held my husband's final gift in my trembling hands, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. The truth was more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. If you've stayed with me through this whole nightmare, subscribe and hit that bell. Because what we discovered in Charles's other documents will shock you even more than what you've already heard. The network that killed my husband, they are not done with my family. And tomorrow, they are coming for us all.